All right, hi everyone, my name is Carolina. I'm really excited to be here, and to begin, I'd like to ask you all a question. Is Barack Obama an American? I know this seems like a totally absurd question to ask, but it is one that I'd like you to keep in mind over the next 5 minutes because it is really important to me personally, and for you to understand why, I should probably give you a little bit of background. So I'm a political science student here at ASU. I've lived in Arizona most of my life, and I was actually born in the US, but for the longest time, I really didn't consider myself an American, and today I want to talk a little bit about why. So although I was born in the US, my parents are originally from Brazil, and both of them are mostly of European ancestry, but my paternal grandmother is originally from Japan. And as a kid, I spent a few years living in Buenos Aires, Argentina with my parents, and I grew up spending almost every summer in São Paulo, Brazil with the rest of my family. So although English is my native language, I also grew up speaking Spanish and Portuguese, and from all of this, you can probably see that I have kind of this really muddled ethnic and racial and linguistic background. And a lot of times whenever I try to explain this background to people, I can see them become a little uncomfortable with the fact that they can't really neatly define my identity. So a lot of times they'll say things like, okay, so you're not Hispanic, and you're not really Asian, but you're definitely not white either. So what are you? And that's a pretty unsettling question to be asked, especially like when you're in high school, and you're already feeling like super existential, and someone comes and asks, what are you? And you're like, I don't know. So it was really uncomfortable for me because I didn't have an answer. And obviously no one has any of the answers when they're 15, and everyone has acne, and no one knows how to flirt, and no one knows how to dress, and everything's always a big mess. But on top of that, I had kind of this added conflict where I was constantly asking myself, am I Brazilian? Am I Japanese? Am I American? Am I even allowed to call myself an American? And so this question of what are you really haunted me until I realized that this phenomenon of possessing multiple identities is actually becoming increasingly common in the US. And to illustrate what I mean, I'll actually use the example of Barack Obama. So Obama was born in Hawaii to a white American mother and a father who was a Kenyan immigrant. And following his parents' separation, he actually spent a few years living in Indonesia with his mother. So what do I have in common with the President of the United States, aka the most charming man in the world? Not much, but there are a few things that we share. We're both of mixed race, we're both the children of immigrants, we both grew up abroad, and other people have always doubted our identities as Americans. And when I reflected on this, I realized that the biggest reason that I never considered myself an American was because other people didn't consider me an American. My schoolmates, my television, the books that I read all told me that being American meant being white, having American parents, growing up in the US and speaking English my whole life. Finally, realizing that I was in fact allowed to call myself an American was actually really powerful for me. And it was embracing this identity that allowed me to pursue a degree in political science and a career in international relations. So where would I be if I hadn't come to this realization? I see this tendency to define what it means to be American on such rigid terms as a problem for a lot of reasons. Recently, we've heard world leaders of all types say that migration is the defining issue of the 21st century. We've seen this issue manifest itself fairly prominently here in Arizona with the influx of undocumented migrants from Central America. And we've also seen it manifest more recently following the migration of Syrian refugees escaping civil war in their home country. The migratory trends of both of these groups have, I think, been met with a lot of hostility, and I, like many of you, have heard people voice their concern that these immigrants might threaten what it is to be American. But as a primary world power, the US is often expected to respond to these and other global crises. Yet how can we if we're unable to empathize with those in need or find parts of ourselves hidden in other people? Is our sense of national identity really so fragile that we can't engage in healthy international relationships with other countries? And what hope does the US then have for diplomacy or peace if we cannot literally and figuratively speak the languages of our neighbors? These questions are important to me as a political science major, obviously, but also as an American and a global citizen. I see my own experiences of often feeling like an outsider in my own country as being very closely related to our need to collectively reevaluate what it means to be American. Who is allowed to call themselves an American? What kind of limitations are we imposing on people that we don't consider American? And how might they otherwise contribute to our country if they only had the chance to feel like they were a part of it? I'm not John Kerry. I'm not Angela Merkel. I don't have a magical solution to the Syrian civil war. And unfortunately, I don't know the best path towards immigration reform. So my purpose today is a lot simpler. I want to ask that you, as citizens or residents of the US, learn to embrace your multiple identities, understand how they merge and intersect, and engage with me in a collective reevaluation of what it means to be American. Thank you.